Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the Stratosphere Studio. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. It is the 23rd of September, 2024. I hope everybody's doing well. Got a crazy, groovy, nutty, spooky, weird kind of show for you. Just as always, nothing special, nothing particularly different. I've mentioned this many times before. I'll mention it again because I think it just bears mentioning because it's more, I think it's more subconscious really than anything. We run on the Twitch stream. We do a pre-run for Stratosphere Lounge and Stratosphere Studio, and on Stratosphere Studio, the final cue that we're getting ready to roll is we roll the opening to Star Trek, the original series. And I've mentioned this before, but by golly, I'm going to mention it again. There is a quality, because I gave it a little more serious thought this last 30, 40 seconds or so as we're starting to wind this show up to get ourselves on the road. There's a quality of motion to Star Trek, the original series, that you lose once you go down the road, the wormhole road, the Stargate road, and especially that Star Wars kind of we're here kind of road. Just in the opening credits, you've obviously got the ship just streaking past and so on, but there's a number of shots where you're looking out here and then the ship just comes in and then it goes out. It's over here, then it's moving through space, now it's over there, and there's a planet and it's going towards the planet. You get the sense that you are traveling from one place to another. You don't get that sense with the Stargate. The Stargate, you're in a tube and then you're wherever the hell you are. And the same thing with this god-awful, I guess people thought that looked cool. Whenever I see that on Star Trek, like on Next Generation or whatever, when a whole fleet, first of all, it's just ripping off Star Wars, which is beneath Star Trek, frankly. Star Trek should be ashamed of itself for ripping off anything that Star Wars does. But secondly, it takes away that sense of real motion. You're not going from here to there. You're in a unnatural environment. You're in a tube. It doesn't look like space inside the tube. It doesn't look like you're moving through the tube, but you don't know where the tube is. It could be an underwater tube. There's something so convincing. That's the word I'm looking for. There's something so convincing about the fact that the Enterprise in the original series doesn't turn and bank. It doesn't turn and bank because it's not an airplane. It's a ship. And ships don't turn and bank. Ships sail stately and serenely from one place to another. And when they started messing around with that, they really, once again, botched something that was just so bloody good. It just plain looks great. And I'm not blaming it on Next Generation. I mean, the first time we saw that was in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, when the Enterprise went in and it was like well, it's not a sonic boom, an optic boom, I guess. But it at the time everybody would go, whoa! But looking back on it with a rainbow spectrum, it's like why? Why not just run it up like you did when you would see it on the shows? We're in orbit now we're leaving orbit, and now we're heading off into the stars, and now we're going faster. It sounds like a trivial thing, but the more I think about it, the more I realize it's what gave that show a sense that ship was real. There was something real about that experience. And when you looked out the window, because it's a pretty small window when you think about it. I mean, the Enterprise has a 46-inch, flat screen TV for 12 people to watch. But when you're looking out the window, you're in motion, and see, I'm on a roll now. Now I'm on a roll. And on Star Trek, the original series, you got an idea of how fast you were going by how fast the starfield was moving. You could just look around the bridge, and every time you'd look out the window, you could tell whether we're in a hurry or not. Eric Blake says, here we go again. Well, here we go again. Enterprise D never banked. Of course it did. But it gave you a sense of, are we in a hurry? Because if we're moving along at warp 2 or 3 or whatever, Okay, everything's pretty cool on board the Enterprise. That's a useful dramatic tool. Yeah, everything's pretty much normal. And then when you're really booking it, you're booking it. So anyway, that's that. Got that out of the way. Um, I got a chance to see Oppenheimer last night. Natasha was doing some work. She didn't really want to see Oppenheimer, so I watched it on the couch by myself there. I've been looking forward to seeing it for a while, and I knew she didn't want to see it. So I got to tell you, I thought it was just a masterpiece. I mean, I thought it was absolutely breathtaking filmmaking. Um, it it was the most dexterously written and and without question the best edited movie I think I've ever seen. They had they had so many time points and plot lines, but mostly time points that they were jumping back and forth between, and they managed to tell a story that hung together. I mean, I thought it was fantastic. Cillian Murphy was looked more like Oppenheimer than Oppenheimer did, and I thought it was a real fair treatment of him. I didn't didn't end up liking the guy much. I ended up liking Lawrence a lot. Um, so we got guys working outside again. See, they're completely remodeling the floor, and this time they're not using a steam hammer on porcelain in the bathroom, but they are talking out there. I might actually have to go over there and ask them if they could just keep it down just a little bit, because it's a little hard to. Oh, is it Killian? I thought it might have been with the hard C for, because I guess he's Irish. Killian. He's terrific, and it was great to see some old faces again. I always liked Josh Hartnett. It was good to see Josh Hartnett back again. It was good to see Matthew Modine again. Um, Gary Oldman has a. It's not uncredited, but it's not in any of the list of names. It's just in the credit roll at the end. He's got a brief appearance as Harry Truman, and there's a moment there where, at the very end of the movie, where Oppenheimer goes to meet Truman after the bomb's been dropped, and Oppenheimer says, "Well, you know, I feel like I've got blood on my hands." And Truman just reaches into his pocket and pulls out a handkerchief and just waves it at him, just taunting him, like, here, here you go. This is for your bloody hands. He's got line, it's just an amazing line. He says, "Do you think the people in Hiroshima?" He said Hiroshima. "Do you think the people in Hiroshima give a shit about who built the bomb? They don't care about who built the bomb. They only care about who dropped the bomb. I did, not you. I did. It's not about you." And Oppenheimer's escorted out of the Oval Office, and just as the door's closing, Truman says, "Don't ever let that crybaby back in here again." And I thought, man, um, I agree with you, Dave Big Booty. Um, Findy says, "I wanted to make a film about Oppenheimer, the father of the F-bomb." That's a bloody clever line. That's a very clever line. Making a film about the father of the F-bomb. That's bloody marvelous. As and by the way, it wasn't just the effects that they used for the detonation of the Trinity test. It was the graphic elements of physics. The way that physics looked in the movie was just breathtakingly good. Um, I think the movie came to exactly the wrong conclusion, which I'll get to in a minute. But I really, really, really liked it. I thought Matt Damon was really good in it. I would like to see more of Matt Damon in Oppenheimer, and just it was just a very, very complex movie about a very, very complex guy. And I didn't like Oppenheimer, but I didn't hate him either. I thought it was very fair to him. I just thought he was a brilliant, conflicted guy with who was like, so I get this horrible feeling that this is what's going to happen with AI. Is that all the people that are working so hard on AI and they're so impressed with what they're doing and they're putting their lives and their hearts and souls into this thing, they they get to the point the bomb detonates, the gadget detonates at Trinity. They're overjoyed because they've been working on it for 3 years. They didn't know if it was going to fail or not. That would have been a bit of a dud. They had all kinds of last minute complications on the bomb, and the bomb works. And then they drop the bomb on Hiroshima, and then all of a sudden they all look mortified, like, wow. There's a scene towards the very end, or I guess it's not so much the end because it's a long movie. There's a scene where the scientists who built the bomb are looking at slides of Hiroshima after the bomb was dropped, and they don't they don't show you what they're looking at, but they're clearly looking at charred bodies and badly burned people and stuff. And the room is just silent, and they're all got these mortified faces, And and I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm right with Harry Truman on this. Here's your handkerchief. What did you knew what this was? If you didn't want to be a part of dropping this on human beings, then you shouldn't have been on the program. I can understand that. I don't agree with it. I think it was, needless to say, I made my bones on True Story of the Atomic Bombs. If you're new to the Stratosphere shows, the first afterburner I did that got any, it was probably the third afterburner I ever wrote and did at all. It's called The True Story of the Atomic Bombs, and it's about 17 minutes long, and I think it is, well, up until doing Apollo 11, what we saw was the best work I ever did, and it's very depressing to have the first thing out of the gate be the best work you ever did for 10 years. But I think it's a historical document. I think it's really compelling, and I think that that when you're finished watching it, there's really no question about it that it was the thing to do. But I certainly understand people that wouldn't want to have that on their conscience. But at the same time, again, you hear these AI researchers, leading AI researchers, and they're saying things like, well, there's a pretty good chance that we'll be able to survive this. That, there's 50-50 chance it's going to end civilization, but if it doesn't, then it's going to be wonderful. Those are a lot bigger odds than the odds that they had about the chance of blowing up the atmosphere, which they apparently thought was a minute possibility that this chain reaction would just continue. Ace Fendi says Chris Nolan actually wrote the script in the first person, meaning Oppenheimer is describing the action from his experiences, not narration, but first-person action description. Yes, and Nolan is a great director, and when I found out that he wrote that screenplay, I just couldn't believe it, based on a book called American Prometheus, the story of Robert Oppenheimer. But it's an amazing screenplay. It's amazingly complex screenplay. It's constantly in motion. And it's constantly in different styles. And you see a scene in one style, and then you come back and see the scene again from another perspective, and you see the scene a third time from Oppenheimer's perspective. And every time they're using a different lens, and it's got a different feel, and it's it's like an orchestra of cuts. A symphony is what it was. It was a fantastically well-made movie. But now to the kind of the point of all this, and that is that what they basically say, and I think this is probably true for Oppenheimer, I think they say it out loud in the movie verbatim, is his wife says, you think that because you're letting them crucify you to atone for the guilt of building the bomb, that he's martyring himself on purpose in order to atone for building the bomb. And that seems to be historically what Oppenheimer's position on this was. He very famously said when the bomb detonated, and now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. Well, you knew that when you built it. See, this is now to my departure from the movie. The movie ends with this idea that Oppenheimer, and they say this verbatim too, depending on how things go in the future, they say it's so early, it's too close to, what we've done here has changed the world. That's true. His final scene with Albert Einstein is, he says, remember when I said I was worried that we might start a chain reaction that would destroy the world? And Einstein says yes, and he says, well, I think we did. And then final shot in the movie is the Earth's atmosphere burning up as these nuclear weapons basically just destroy the entire planet. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, the only part that's missing from this is the actual destruction of the world. That's the only thing that's missing. Is they've been talking about this since 15th of July 1945. From the moment that bomb detonated, they've been talking about any day now we're going to nuke ourselves into oblivion, and that hasn't. It's abated since the Cold War, but it still hasn't gone away. This is what all liberals believe. This is what the filmmakers believe, is that it's just a question of time now. Oppenheimer has created the means to destroy civilization, given man fire that will destroy mankind, and therefore it's a catastrophe and a moral oblivion. And I say, well, if it turns out we had nuked ourselves into the Stone Age, then you'd be right about that. But we didn't, and I noticed that because I was paying attention. And the reason we didn't was because Oppenheimer built an end to war, to full-scale war. The human race has never gone this long without civilizational conflict. We've been at peace for nearly a century. You have all these. Not saying that Vietnam didn't hurt, and I'm not saying that the people that died there, or Iraq, or anywhere else. I'm not saying they didn't count. I'm just saying that the civilizational war, full on, lay waste to the lands, to everything. Enslaved people. Conquering armies. All of it. That hasn't happened since we've had nuclear weapons, and it can't. And as a person who spent an awful lot of time in the Cold War writing the Cold War series and seeing how close we came and how high the pressures were to actually do it, I've come out of the Cold War What We Saw series believing that it's impossible. That it is in fact impossible. Because it is the ultimate no-win situation. And this is what alarms me so much about AI research, is that you are building a machine that doesn't have those behavioral inhibitors on them. You're building a machine that might decide that wiping out the human race is a good idea. It's not us. The reason that the reason that Oppenheimer's premise, there's a scene earlier in the movie, it's a long movie, where one of the guys says, I was flying a combat mission and I saw this streak across the sky, and it was a V-2 missile heading for England at nighttime, bomber pilot or something, and he says, I can only imagine missiles, armed with nuclear weapons on the top. And then the very, 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 very end of the movie, you see rows of missiles, and you see like a landscape with rockets shooting up, which I thought looked like toys. It looked absurd. Here comes the big day when all the missiles launch, and here comes Judgment Day. Here comes Skynet. Here comes World War III, and it hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened. It's not an accident that it didn't happen. This is my entire point. I don't know why people seem so incapable of grasping this. It didn't happen because it was unthinkable. Everybody's saying, well, everybody's so terrified of it. It's like, you're supposed to be terrified of it. That's why it works. So in a weird sort of way, movies like this and movies like The Day After and Threads and all the rest of it helped to keep the peace, because nuclear weapons have put an end to large-scale war. Well, what happens if they're used someday? Well, I'm not saying there won't be a tactical nuclear weapon used, but no one's talking about that. We're talking about full-scale thermonuclear war, toe-to-toe with the Ruskies. No, there's no win in it. Rogue states and terrorists and nihilists and all the rest of it can create nuclear weapons. You could detonate a nuclear weapon in Times Square, and that'd be an awfully bad day. But rogue states are not capable of civilizational annihilation. That's something that the United States, Russia, China have, and I suppose Britain, Israel, and France could also create a very bad day. But again, this is my point. They see the movie. They see the movie. They tell the story of Oppenheimer. They know what happened since then. And all we get is any day now, the liberals are going to be proven right that this was a gigantic mistake and we shouldn't have done it. As I point out rather succinctly at the end of the afterburner on atomic bombs, I'm very certain I would not be here if it had not been for the atomic bombs. And that goes for, I think it's a reasonable statement to say, millions of people my age whose parents, whose fathers had survived the war in Germany. My dad got to Germany in April of '45. He never got shot at in Germany. He was prepared to get shot at in Germany, but he got there in April of '45 and was an MP during the occupation, an intelligence officer, and he expected, as everybody else expected, to go to Japan and get killed going ashore on the Japanese islands, which is what they were preparing to do. So, oh no, they were about to surrender. Well, funny thing about that is that when the Japanese apparently were about to surrender the Japanese lost the war when they bombed Pearl Harbor, and they knew it. They knew it. They could not find a way out of their pride and their face. And they had the most arcane method of making decisions. I forget what the Japanese word is for it now. It's called digging around the roots, which meant that they had essentially 6 leaders. They had admirals, generals, and some civilians. And these 6 people had to be in complete agreement. There could be no dissension. No dissension. And then once they'd reached an agreement, that would go to the emperor, and the emperor would bless it, and that's how they ruled. And so if these 6 people couldn't talk in unison, you couldn't get a decision. So for the last, certainly everybody says, well, Japan was already defeated. That's true. They were defeated, but they hadn't surrendered. They kept fighting, and they were expecting to fight on the beaches with spears, and they were teaching children how to take explosive packs, put them on their backs, and dive underneath American tanks and blow themselves up. That's what they were expecting to do, and that's what the kamikazes were and all the rest of it. I'm not going to go through the whole afterburner again, but I am just so sick and tired of this moral condemnation of something that was not just a net good for Americans. And by the way, Harry Truman is not obligated to save Japanese lives. We didn't start that conflict, you may have noticed. But he did save millions of Japanese lives by dropping that atomic bomb. And the last thing I'll say on this Oppenheimer thing, because it did cause me to pause and think about it for a second, having just finished this second trilogy, a trilogy about the War in the Pacific from Ian Toll, I think. In March of 1945, the first firebombing of Tokyo occurred with a big raid. 300 Stratofortresses went in low for the first time and dropped incendiaries on Tokyo. They probably killed 100,000 people that day. Am I proud of this? No, not proud of it, and I'm not happy about it. Will I defend it? Yes. Did I say? Yeah, superfortresses. I didn't say stratofortresses, did I? I get that confused. Superfortresses, B-29s. That didn't end the war. They did the same thing to all of their cities. It still didn't end the war. Stratofortresses, no, superfortresses, sorry. Stratofortresses, the B-52, that hadn't come along yet. And so when Tokyo was firebombed, they said, well, it didn't get the emperor. And 100 million people dying a glorious suicide death will be able to repel the Americans. So basically the reason that the Japanese didn't surrender was because they couldn't. Not because of the Americans, not because we wanted to impress the Russians, all this BS that you hear after the fact by armchair people who had no skin in the game, and just, oh, well, those horrible people, those slave owners and all that. No. They could not reach a consensus, and they never could reach a consensus, and we'd be fighting them still, right now, we'd still be fighting them, if it hadn't been for something that was so overwhelming that the emperor finally decided to step in and say, here's my chance to finally have a reason to just overrule these people and just say, that's it, we're done, we're done. So anyway, Um, yes, Tim Drake, Tim Dake, sorry, or Dake or Duke, sorry, Tim. And I point this out in the Afterburner as well. They said that we should have warned them. If we'd warned them, they would have surrendered. Well, guess what? We didn't warn them because we only had 4 devices. One of them we used as a test, so there's 25% of the arsenal left. We got 2 bombs that are usable. We shipped those over. We're working on a third plutonium bomb, which was never used. And they said you should just drop it out at sea. And we said, sure, we'll just give them a ring and tell them we're going to send a lone superfortress over. Bring your lawn chairs out there. Now, no fair trying to shoot it down because that wouldn't be sporting. If we tell you we're going to send a weapon of ultimate destruction, they think that if we dropped it somehow offshore, they would have surrendered. But we know that's not true because we dropped one on their city and they didn't surrender. And we dropped a second one on their city and they still didn't surrender. They didn't surrender until 5 days after Nagasaki. And they say, well, they couldn't have surrendered. How could they have surrendered? I said, well, you know how they actually surrendered? You know what they actually did? They got on the radio and said, we surrender. That's what they did. And when and by the way, and this needs to be said too, because this is an important historical fact. When they finally surrendered, we had bomber missions that were on the way. We're constantly raiding the coast with our navy. And all of the aircraft and the supplies that were being loaded into landing ships, the second that they surrendered, the instant that they surrendered, that they actually surrendered, we unloaded all of those weapons off those ships, packed it full of medicine and food and hospital supplies and all sorts of other things, and landed and started feeding the people that their regime had been starving to death. I don't want to hear about this moral ambiguity about it. I'm just so sick of it. It's just so sick of this. Oh, we're just as bad as they are. No, we're not. Actually, we're not as bad as they are. In fact, no one has ever behaved this way in history. And so Oppenheimer is a brilliant film about a brilliant guy that leaves us once again with this hand wringing. And the only moment of real truth in that whole movie that I thought actually merited a reality check was Harry Truman saying, "Well, here's your handkerchief. Boo hoo hoo. You knew what you were doing when you did it. You feeling guilty now? No one's going to blame you for that. You didn't drop the bomb. You built the bomb. I dropped the bomb." I thought, well, damn, man. Anyway, that's that. I have something to show. Make some people happy, make other people wail. Like little babies, they're going to cry like little children when they see this. The thought of it is so horrible, it's almost inconceivable. So obviously I've been grinding gears here for quite a while now. Just, a lot of stuff going on and just not making anything like the kind of progress I want to make or said I would make and so on. So I've been, it's another idea I've been talking about for a whole long time. But I whipped this together, so pardon me while I whip this out. Drop it into here, please don't crash. Boom. I'll drop it into here and you can tell me what you think. Badoom. So, let me tell you why this has been taken so long and why I've put this graphic up here while I was working on this graphic. I put this graphic up here on this show because now I'm committed. I've been thinking about doing this for a long time, talking about doing this for a long time, and my concern is that if it's going to be on the news cycle, if I'm going to come in and do one story on the news cycle, I got to be here by 6 a.m. every day, because if I'm not here at 6 a.m. every day, then the news will get stale and blah 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 blah, and I just start talking myself out of doing it. And then I suddenly realized, and what if I can't do it every day? What if I start missing days? What if I can't live up to this commitment? And I thought, even if it's once a week is better than nonce a week, right? And getting a story out, I normally get in here around 9 or 10. If I get in here at 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 even, if the story is 6 hours behind the news cycle instead of 6 days behind the news cycle, that's a net gain as well. So, so I'm just gonna just do it. I'm just gonna sit here in this chair. I'm just gonna turn it on. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna crack open the old Instapundit. I'm gonna look at a story that I think is most interesting. I'll probably check Google and see what's trending, and I will do, a 10 minute, 10 to 15 minute hot take on whatever is happening at the moment, and I'll get as many of them done as I can. Um, and and if I miss a day, then I miss a day, and if I miss 3 days, then I miss 3 days. But guess what? Right now, I'm already missing 7 days, so anything's going to be an improvement. So I figured I might as well start on that tomorrow. Um, just you know, we 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 get paid by YouTube, which is some cold comfort after the molestation that YouTube inflicts on conservatives. But I did get a check from them for the views, and it came through today, and it was almost double what it usually is. It's still not very much money, at least certainly not compared to what it used to be. But JRoar 123 on YouTube says missing 7 days is a weak excuse. Clever people here. Um, so so I'm just going to come on in and do it, and see what the result is. Oh, but YouTube. So we had a couple videos that went to 20,000. Now, when we started doing right angles, we were routinely doing 35, 40,000 views a day, per show rather. And YouTube changes and times have changed and all the rest of it. But I'm looking at guys like Nerdrotic and Nerdrotic especially, and Doomcock and all these things, and I realize what they're doing is they're just putting out stuff every day. They're just regularly doing it. Now the question is, Snarf Magoo says live show. I'm more than happy to do the show live. I think it probably would help to do the show live. But this is the part that the part that's been holding me back is I don't want people waiting for me. What if I can't make it? So here's what I'm going to do, and this is just how it's going to have to be. Assume nothing. There's not going to be a schedule. I'm going to try to do one every day, and I'm going to do them when I get here. And so I take that responsibility off my shoulders, which is keeping me from doing it. So I'll do it live, but it's not going to be like expect to see it at this time or that time. I'm just going to plain turn it on, and I'm going to do it. And I think probably what I'll do is probably I'll just turn or not look at the comments at all. Just block them from my view. Do my 10 minutes, and then just take a look and see what people are saying, and then do a little bit of back and forth for another 5 minutes, and it seems like that would be a pretty good day. So that is it. And in any event, it'll be something new. Yeah, Eric says it's going to be on bill time. That's right. And I was fighting. I was like, how do I get this off of bill time? And then I realized, well, it doesn't get off of bill time. It either happens on bill time or it doesn't happen, and it hasn't been happening, and I'm not happy about that, and other people are not happy about it either. So that's what we're going to do. Anyway, that's kind of the run-in for this. We can jump ourselves into the questiones here, and see what we got going for us over there. I do like the logo, though. I think the logo looks pretty bitchin', frankly. Okay, here we go. You can do it, Bill. You can do it. You can do it, Bill. There it is. You got this, Bill. I'm looking at. Everybody, get your bingo cards out. I'm looking at macaques on police body cam videos lately. But one of them that I saw earlier today was just this guy who was mostly it's women who just screaming banshees and just insane. This guy was just plain trying to be a, Mr. Tough Guy and a super obnoxious and telling the cops what to do. And I'm watching this and I'm watching and I'm thinking, I'm getting to the point when I'm actually thinking, there's something to be said for police brutality. Really, there's something to be said for like a billy club to the nose. I'm not saying you lead with that, but I'm saying some of these people are so unbelievably obnoxious and not deep. Look, when I say disrespectful, I'm not saying you have to have be obsequious with these people. You don't have to bow and scrape. I'm just saying that some of these people are just like, sometimes people just need, there's just not enough people getting punched in the face. It's Bill Burr's opinion and my opinion too. The Bills are sticking with this one. It's like, there's no consequences for their toxicity, which is reaching pandemic levels. If you'll excuse that god-awful word, I'm very happy I haven't heard that word in a long time. Let's see what we got here. Okay. The forum. Let's retreat to the forum so that we may see what is going on. Let's go up to the lab and see what's on the slab. I see you quiver with anticipation. Ian Nolan. I got Ian Nolan. Okay, hang on now. Wow. Chris Taylor is just turned a flamethrower on me, and apparently I deserve it. So let's find out what that's all about. All right. We'll get to that in a second. Let's do Ian Nolan first. Ian Nolan. Bill, I'm currently wrapping up another trip out to Sedona, and it occurs to me that I think you need to make another trip out to northern Arizona for historic reasons. Prescott and Jerome both have their ties to Frank Luke, and Sunset Crater near Flagstaff is where the Apollo astronauts trained for their moon landing. I didn't even know there was a Sunset Crater. All are worth seeing. They're all within about an hour's radius of Sedona. You might be able to talk me into that, not in the immediate future, but I know Natasha just loved it out there, and she had just gotten her car, and she drove for hours and hours and hours and just was over the moon about driving. So that's not completely out of the question. Maybe this question is too political for tonight's stream, so skip it. Now that the debate is over, more evidence coming in that Haitians are eating pets in Springfield, and the media, of course, outright lied that there was no evidence for it. At what point is the evidence strong enough that you'll release your episode on it? Well, strangely enough, that has to do with Chris Taylor's comment, so let's go ahead and just read this verbatim, because it looks like we'll find out how much of this I deserve. From Chris Taylor, I was very, very disappointed with BillWhittle.com this last week. You canceled a timely episode following up on Trump's "they're eating pets in Springfield, Ohio" comments in the debate because Mr. Ott called the city manager and the government officials' position that it wasn't happening. So you declined to post the episode since you didn't want BillWhittle.com to be spreading unproven allegations that might turn out not to be true. But then Mr. Ott's episode of Right Angle came out for the week. It was focused on spreading unproven allegations that might turn out not to be true. Well, it is less than that would be the episode he did on the guy behind The Sound of Freedom. Well, it's less than 50 days out from possibly the most consequential presidential election of the millennium so far, and there just isn't time left to run down and verify every jot and tittle of the horrible multi-billion-dollar graft allegations against Kamala's brother-in-law and campaign advisor, or to wait until the damning whistleblower account of ABC rigging the presidential debate is proven in a court of law, except neither of those were urgent and important issues that couldn't wait for the allegations to be proven. The allegations that right-angle trafficked in that had taken up the limited production time y'all had before this pivotal election was some guy that was the basis for a movie that was in theaters about a year ago has been accused of sexual harassment. Really? Okay, I'll just go ahead and read this whole thing, then I'll see if I can get an answer on it. I'm not mad at Mr. Ott. As your political officer, it's clearly his job to keep you from doing anything too consequential or popular. He's just protecting the status quo. I'm mad that when on your Stratosphere show they had something in the chat say that they knew it was happening because they lived in Springfield, and your next response wasn't, is there any chance they could put me in touch with someone whose pet was killed or who has any evidence of this, especially video? You put all this effort into theoretical ways to help Trump win the election, making videos pontificating on psychology and social proof, and then the country is abuzz with talk of Trump's crazy pet-eating allegations, and the Democrats are going around telling everyone it's not only 100% false, but that he wouldn't even slander a whole ethnicity of people like that to gin up his white supremacist followers, with no concern for how much it endangered those poor Haitian refugees who are now cowering from Nazi death threats. Just goes to show how evil and cruel Trump is and how ignorant and hate-filled his followers are, and you sure don't want to go off the reservation and make common cause with those kind of people, do you? Pretty harsh, but we'll get to that. They're dropped at your feet. Is a possible chance for BillWhittle.com to have a real influence on the 2024 election by distributing video proof or moving interviews of Springfieldians whose beloved pets were, in fact, killed and eaten by Kamala's border policy poster children, but you didn't even ask her to follow up with you? Maybe the effort would have been for naught. Maybe you wouldn't have been able to get any of that video or proof, but you didn't even bend down to pick up the opportunity off the floor right in front of you and see. I hope I'm wrong in calling you, and you called her back after the show and it didn't pan out. I also hope you did finally do your membership drive, and more importantly, I hope that I get a chance to support the colonies on some Kickstarter program, but for now, I'll be canceling my subscription for 2025 and donating what I could have spent to the Trump campaign to give them some more direct support. Maybe you could do a right angle on immediate direct ways viewers could help the Republicans in the last month before this election, and hopefully they'll get past your Zampolit. In the meantime, I'll try to give you a couple more challenging and interesting questions to springboard off of between now and my Bill Whittle expiration. Best of luck to you all, even Ott, especially Zoe, because he seems like a great guy and is an interesting change of pace as a substitute host. Didn't Mr. Ott used to be a reporter? If calling up City Hall and just reprinting their PR statement is his idea of investigative reporting, then it's no wonder he's selling dishwashers now. P.S. Sorry this was too long. I'll try to send you an email with the links to the Gen Z mental health issue and the discussion of the influence of sea power upon history I mentioned in the previous episode. I don't know if that was the Mahan article, but anyway, there you go. Okay, well, let's see what we can have to say about that. Well, I don't think anything he said is unfair, and I certainly don't blame him for canceling his membership. There's nothing dishonest about what he said. There's nothing that's not true there. So let me go through these points one by one here. Not that it's going to change his opinion, but just so you have a little clearer idea of how decisions are made in this particular location. So let's go back up to the top, and we'll start at the top here. Very disappointed BillWhittle.com this last week. Okay, I understand that. Canceled an episode on Trump's eating pets in Ohio because Scott Ott read during the taping, I made the case that they're eating pets in this is the chronology of what happened on that show. Scott, I basically see the headline that says that pets are being eaten. I mentioned that I had been in Miami during the Mario boat lift and in the years after, and that Santeria, which is the Cuban equivalent of the kind of island worship that they have in Haiti, which is voodoo, or call it voodoo if you want to, because that's basically the name of it. Let me think about this. I'm just trying to remember how the taping went. So I said they're eating the pets. I tossed it to Steve. Steve said that they're eating pets. We both agreed, and we both said this is not the kind of behavior that we expect from guests in our house or our country, and that there is a fundamental difference between people who come here as immigrants wanting to become Americans and live a better life versus people that come to this country, start eating our cats and dogs, who need to piss off pretty quick. And then in the middle of this, I turned it over to Scott, and Scott read the police report, which I had not heard or known was existent. And in the middle of the taping, as Scott is reading this statement, I said to myself, I don't have any evidence of this. And I am not a news agency. I don't have the resources to pursue national stories. I can understand you being angry at me for not having called and gotten video of them eating pets. I'll perhaps think about copying this email and sending it on to Daily Wire, who does have the resources to do these kind of things, and I don't believe they did it either. That company is worth $300 or $400 million, and I'm not. So I don't have the ability to start an investigative process on a show that essentially is three guys sitting around talking about what we bring to the show. So that's why that happened that way. I have said repeatedly and consistently on any subject that I don't like being wrong, and that if the truth is somewhere, I will stand there and I'll move. I'll change my mind. When Scott read those comments in real time, I thought, okay, I have gone with a story that I can't verify, and here's an official denunciation of it, and I don't want to be the guy who's out there getting... There was back in 2008 or 9, there was when we were doing Right Angle, and it was called Trifecta, I did an episode on a picture. It was a picture of Barack Obama, who had just been elected, and a line of people, or military people or something, and he's extending his hand, and the other person is not shaking his hand. And I said, see, this is disgraceful, and look, it just shows you how humiliating this whole thing is for the military and all the rest of it. And just as we got that thing just about to go to air, one of the associate producers on the show, who was a big old liberal, came to me and said, that's not what's happening in the picture. They're not shaking his hand because some other reason, right? It looked like it was a clear-cut case of, okay, but it wasn't that. It was something else. And I said, thank you, because I felt like I dodged a bullet, because I did not want to go out there and be wrong about something. There's enough stuff out there to be right about for me to not want to. Look, it's not even a question of me wanting to. It's got nothing to do with ratings, got nothing to do with clicks, got nothing to do with membership numbers, got nothing to do with anything. I don't want to be wrong when people are listening to me about my opinion. And if I can't know I'm right, then I'm not going there. I just simply got from Scott Ott, who spends a lot more time on these issues than I do. When Scott Ott does a show about a report, some budget report, he'll have read the whole report. So when he says they have denied that this happened, that the allegations are untrue, when Scott says that on the air in the middle of the show, I'm thinking he knows something I don't know. I looked and saw the story an hour and a half before we taped. I said, okay, that's what I want to talk about this week. He dug deeper into it than I did, and so I said, well, looks like I got caught with something that I can't verify, and if I can't verify it, I'm not going to do it. I'd rather be absent than wrong on something like this. Now, you can have a real problem with that, and that's fine. and somebody can say that they saw this happening and they live in the neighborhood, and say that I should have followed that up and come up with the evidence that apparently not only Daily Wire, but the entire Republican establishment can't produce, or at least hasn't been able to produce, or at least I haven't seen it, not when it was still a story that was worth talking about. So the sense that I'm somehow supposed to go out there and prove that this happened, when Fox News and Megyn Kelly and Daily Wire and Mark Levin and all of these other people with these enormous budgets and staffs, Prager and all these other giants out there, didn't do it either, seems a little selective to me. You know? It seemed a little selective to me. Now, to the other issue, to the story about Dan, I think it was Dan, what's his name, the guy behind Sound of Freedom. When we shoot Right Angle, the reason Right Angle works is because we don't know. This changed. Was originally we used to know we would do a show. We used to do a show. Just that's a long list of charges. So let me just go through them one by one. Not to exonerate myself, because I have nothing to exonerate myself for. Everything you said is absolutely true. Your conclusion is a sound conclusion. Your response to the conclusion is perfectly rational and reasonable to me. I don't blame you one bit. I'm grateful for your support. I'm grateful for your comments, and I'm grateful for the generosity and the grace that you've shown us up until this point. I'm sorry to lose you, but I understand why you're leaving it. So I'm not arguing against anything that you said. But, and this is not a but meaning in spite of that. Instead of but, let me just say and. When we started doing Right Angle, it was called Trifecta at PJTV, and we would have a phone call. I cannot for the life of me remember, I think it was the day before, about what each one of us is going to be talking about. And so we would know what to talk about and what to say. And so the original Trifectas were scripted, and they just lacked spark. So then we switched to having them unscripted, but still knowing what each person was going to bring in so that we could prepare ourselves for what we were going to talk about. But what we found was that phone conversation, which was not a recorded conversation, that phone conversation was much more interesting than the shows, because we were getting our hot takes on it. We were getting, this is what we're finding out right now. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's cool. And the discussion that we had talking about what we were going to talk about was, to me and to Scott and to Steve and to the producers at PJTV, more interesting than the shows ended up being. So, what evolved out of this is we had so much fun doing that show, we had so much fun doing the call, that we decided to kind of cross the wires a little bit. And so now, what we've been doing for quite a long time now on Right Angle is we have a call where we just get together and talk prior to the taping. That's our members only show. It's an hour, usually an hour, 10 hour and 15 minutes long, and we just talk about anything. We talk about music, we talk about sports, we just talk anything that comes to mind. It's completely unlike the Right Angles. It's got an audience of about 400 or 500 people, something like that, in that general ballpark. And the people that like it, like it. It's just us just being completely off the cuff. There's no preparation, nothing. We just talk. And we have a lot of fun doing it, and we're doing it tomorrow morning. I might be able to talk. I actually thought about doing it live once or twice, but I realized I can't stream it live because I can't stream their cameras live. We all three talk on a Skype call. We record our videos. They put them onto a online drive. I download them and edit them, and I do have to do that in addition to my investigative journalist duties. I have to edit everything. I have to post everything. I have to do the setups, the social medias. I have to do the emails. I have to do all that stuff. So when Scott brought in the story about this guy, I felt bad And I felt bad as a company owner. I said, I don't want to do this story. That's what I said to myself. I don't want to do this story. I don't know why we're doing this story. I don't want to do it. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I was the person who said in the Sound of Freedom thing that I was the one who made the case presumption of innocence. I was the one who said we don't know anything about whether or not this is true, speculating on whether it's true or not. I said I don't see how this affects the good works that he did, but that's not the point. The ultimate point here, Ian, the ultimate point here is this is what's not going to change, okay? And I've said this before many times, and I'll say it again. I can lose every member I've got and go out of business, and I will do that before I tell Steve Green and Scott Robb what to say or what to do. That's the answer to your question right there. I am not going to tell them that they can't talk about something, and I'm not going to tell them what's on the menu and what's off the menu. I'm not going to say, Scott, we're not doing that show. I don't like it. I don't think it appeals to us. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. These are my friends, and I trust them, and I admire them, and the show is what it is. If Scott wants to bring a show like that, that's Scott's business. I didn't like the topic. I wasn't happy about doing the topic, but that's not up to me. That's not up to me. That's what the show is. So in that particular episode, I felt like I was, and again, by the way, I had not heard anything about this at all. I knew nothing about, I didn't even know who the guy was. I didn't know his name. I didn't know it was a news story. Scott decided to bring it for reasons that are known to Scott. And those reasons are good enough for me. This is one of my core values. And I'm telling you right now, I will stay with this. I will stay with this to the bitter end. I'm not telling them what to say. I'm not telling them what's off limits. At PJTV, Alfonso Rachel quit because they told him he couldn't talk so much about his Christianity, and he especially couldn't talk about abortion. And I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not doing it. I'm just not. That's what this is all about. That's what this whole company is about, ultimately. It's not only about the right to speak your mind, but it's about the ability to talk about things that are unpleasant or outside of the groupthink or controversial or just to get out of the echo chamber. That's why we have the show. And I disagree with Scott about a number of things, and over the years I've disagreed with him about more things than I used to. Scott has gone in one direction and I've gone in another direction, but that doesn't change the dynamic, and it doesn't change my respect for him. I have 100% confidence in his personal integrity, his love of country, and his commitment to the truth. He sees things differently than I do, which is why it's important that we have the discussion. He's my Jiminy Cricket. He keeps me from going off the deep end. And because he has a much deeper, I think my net is wider than his is, but when Scott prepares, Scott's level of preparation usually exceeds Steve's and mine combined. So, if he says there's no truth to these allegations, what am I going to do in real time? Nothing. Now, you say that's not my real sin. My real sin was when somebody said, I live in the neighborhood and I know this is happening, and I didn't call and track that lead down and get the video proof that would exonerate Donald Trump. Well, we got a bunch of new members after the 2020 election, and I told people what I still believe, which is that I believe that election was stolen in broad daylight right in front of our eyes. And I saw plenty of good evidence to convince me of that. But we picked up a lot of new members during that 1 or 2 days that I asked for members, and we lost about 1,000 of them about a month later because I was not able to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And that is essentially what people who quit said. They said, I believe that you could, when you said that the election was stolen, I thought that you could change the result. And something's a little bigger than even Bill Woodall, you know. Turns out I was not able to change the result of the 2020 elections. And I'm not able to provide the video evidence that the Republican Party and Conservative America and all of these big other companies have the budgets to go and do. I'm not able to do that. So I'm not being facetious here, and I'm not trying to be flip or sarcastic. I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart, this is sincere. It sounds like it's a sarcastic line, but I'm saying it in 100% sincerity and honesty when I tell you, I am very sorry that I disappointed you in that regard. And I'm sorry I disappointed other people in that regard. But it's just simply beyond my capability. And if I gave somebody the impression that it was within my capability, then I apologize for that as well. I take these kind of things like this last question very, very, very seriously. And the reason I take it so seriously probably is because my dad was just the best manager I ever saw, and he was the best customer service person I ever saw. He says the customer's always right. I believe him. If I've got a customer who's this angry and upset about something, then obviously I've done something that I should have done differently. That's just my starting assumption. You know, if it turns out that that if my dad has a guest saying, I heard this was the best hotel in Bermuda, but having come here, I find that it's horrible, disgraceful, you should be ashamed of yourself, I'm never coming back, and I'm telling all my friends never to come here, then my dad would not argue with that guy. My dad would try to find out what it is about his experience that caused such a reaction. So that's what I'm doing. I am going to make a note to well, I'm going to find out whether it's an annual membership or not. If it turns out it's an annual membership, I will certainly just refund the rest of the year, and I'll send you a check for that, because if you, I guess he's here now. I don't want somebody paying for something that they're not satisfied with, just because they, if they signed up for a year thing. So again, this is not me being spiteful or sarcastic or martyring myself. It offends my personal standard of ethics to have somebody continue to pay for something they don't want to pay for. So I'll see about that first thing in the morning tomorrow. Chris, you've been a big part of these comments forever, and I'm very sorry not only to see you go, but I'm especially sorry that that we let you down in such a fashion that you felt so betrayed by that. So the short form is, I didn't have the evidence, and it turns out it doesn't look like anybody did. I didn't chicken out of this because I was afraid of being mocked or because I didn't want to be associated with Donald Trump. I didn't chicken out of anything. I made a decision as a person whose name is on the company to spike a story that I didn't have confidence in. And I would do that again. I would do that again regardless of what the story is. So I don't know what else to say other than I'm sorry that this is not a qualified, hey, I'm sorry you were offended. It's like, I'm sorry we didn't live up to your expectations. But that's what happened, and that's the way things happen. So hopefully that answers your question, and we'll certainly miss you around here. Moving on, Eric Blake. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the first question of the night that doesn't belong in the Thursday Q&A. Bill, one of my favorite cultural points you made over the years is that conservatives will be able to actually say we're winning in the culture once we learn how to do sexy. Yeah, you bet. Thank you for that, Dave. I forget the complete thing, but you note that we're learning more and more how to be funny, and that's a great asset. However, as great as it is, we're learning to be funny. Once we learn how to be sexy, there's no stopping us. I've been saying this for years. I'll finish Eric's questions in a second. One of the first things I started talking about routinely on my public speaking events was I would go to these events and Tea Party events, and there'd be all these, here's the Constitution, and here's George Washington, and here's, muskets, and some guy with a tricorner hat, and, and the blouse and the leggings and all this stuff. And I was talking to a group of young people, way before college, high school kids once. And I remember the first time I brought this up, I said, look, you got to understand, if George Washington were standing here today, he wouldn't look like this guy here, wouldn't look like him. He'd have an $800 haircut. He'd be wearing a $4,000 suit. He'd have $2,000 shoes. He was the best dressed man in America. He might have been the best dressed man in the world. George Washington was a swinging, sexy dude. He was a huge mountain of a man, and everybody who was around him was struck by his appearance. So you just see this old guy with a white wig and a funny-looking collar, but you need to see him in an Armani suit with a, you need to see the best dressed man in the world, who is stunningly handsome and a physical specimen the likes of which mortal men couldn't produce. You would stand here in awe, because George Washington was and forget about the musket, he's also carrying an AR-15 over his shoulder. He's a swinging, sexy dude. And I remember that that really got their attention, and I started turning that into other things. The Tea Party the original Tea Party was a bunch of guys who were just trashed a pizza place because they charging them for Wi-Fi. I mean, this is how you communicate these kind of issues to people who don't have the educational historical context, which was denied them, deprived from them. American history isn't taught anymore. Civics isn't taught anymore. None of that. You gotta find a way to connect with that. But yes, sexy is everything, and that's why they use sex to sell stuff, because it's that, and that's why I say, how is it that we're having such a problem when we believe in, fast cars, loud guns, and hot women? These are sexy things to have. Nobody. I've mentioned him before so many times because he was the single greatest influence on me, politically and ideologically. But P.J. O'Rourke was a guy who made conservatism not only fun but sexy. And he said, I just love this line. I love it. I love the way he owns it. He said, now I used to, because PJ used to be a radical left winger. He was a full-on communist, working for the overthrow of the country, and he has done his penance for that, and that's why he's so good at what he did. But PJ said, once I became a conservative, all my old friends started calling me a Nazi, and he said that never really bothered me very much, because in all of history since the 40s, there's not a single woman alive who's ever had a fantasy of being ravished by a man dressed up as a liberal. And I just said, well, all right. There you go. I mean, that's how you fight that kind of slander. That's just exactly how you fight that kind of slander. Now, on this bill, I firmly agree, but alas, I think it's fairly obvious what's holding us back, namely our fear of being immoral about it. Sexiness is not immoral, and sexiness is not dirty. Supreme Court Justice, was it Thurgood Marshall? some Supreme Court justice. They were arguing pornography, and he says, I can't describe it, but I know it when I see it. Our friend Zoe's talked about this a lot. Of course, he freely admits to being on the more reluctant side, but we've also seen in the comments of Daily Wire's Pendragon cycle behind the scenes, how dare you have no low necklines for these Atlantean women characters? You're encouraging lust, and on and on. So how do we deal with this, Bill? As you said, we're the ones who believe in loud guns, fast cars, and hot women. But while there's an increasing number of openly conservative bikini models showing up, there's just as much, ew, we should be better than this. What's the solution? There's an AI film out, a little short, called Women of the 50s, and it's, hello, Caledon. It's just a 2-minute, 3-minute AI short, and they're not showing anything below the neck or higher than the elbows. And those are the sexiest women you've ever seen. I mean, they're just stunning. Wholesomeness is sexy because you have to pursue it, and it requires effort and commitment and all the things that make life worth living. So not only can it be done, it's easy to do. My experience has been that the more pornographic something becomes, the less sexy it is, and I don't think that's going to get much argument. We live in a world now where everything is pornographic and nothing is genuinely sexy. It not only can be done, it should be easy to be done. I'm trying to think of an example. Before it became a porn genre, to me, just nothing. As a teenager, there was just nothing hotter than high school cheerleaders because they were untouchable. You know what I mean? You had to be a good girl to be a cheerleader. There was nothing. This is where I'm going with it. There was nothing slutty about cheerleaders. Nothing. In fact, that's why so many guys lost their minds over them. There was nothing slutty about cheerleaders. They were paragons of virtue, or at least they were intended to be paragons of virtue, and we all were hoping we could be the ones that could maybe turn that virtue down just a little bit. But in the privacy of our own automobiles, and that's still a long way from hitting the home run. If you got a problem with low necklines on Daily Wire's Pendragon, that's fine. And no one, certainly not me, is telling you that you're wrong. And I'm not even saying that you're not right about the moral degradation of society. But the fact of the matter is, we are living in a swamp, and you can't pull people out of a swamp without getting a little swampy yourself. This is my operational premise when it comes to things like colonies and all the rest of it. You can't go into the swamp and pull people out of there without getting a little bit swampy, or maybe even quite a bit swampy. The question is, which direction are you pulling people? Are you pulling them deeper into the swamp, or are you trying to pull them out of the swamp? George Carlin, when he was talking about the 7 words you can't say on TV, he had that line about just hard to believe. You'd have a bunch of Hell's Angels standing around outside a bar saying, one of them saying, "I have to go tinkle now." I mean, I remember that line being, yeah, you can make a movie where you basically say, "I have to go tinkle now," but you're not going to get seen by the people that need to see it, and you're not going to, and there's no reason to preach to the choir. It's such a cut and dried phrase. It's such a cliche. We just toss it out there because it's a form of verbal shorthand. But really, it's a profoundly good figure of speech. Preaching to the choir is the definition of preaching to the choir is doing something that is pointless, doing something that is a waste of time and effort and demeaning to you and the choir. So, to try to answer your question as best I can, Eric, there's a difference between sexiness and sluttiness, and I find sluttiness to be unsexy, and furthermore, in a world where there is nothing but sluttiness, genuine sexiness, I think, has even more power than it used to. Um, I really, and having watched a number of these men's channels and the MGTOW thing, and men going their own way thing, and the women hitting the wall thing, and all of the body count videos, and all the episodes of, or at least the clips of the episodes I've seen from things like whatever podcasts and all the rest of it. It's like virtue is sexy, number one, and virtue is so rare that I think most men and women, young men and women, would be really attracted to it. I really, even the dumbest of these bimbos on that channel who are just insufferably entitled. Every single one of them is, clinically obese. They're all convinced that they're tens. They're all falling out of their clothes. They look like 24 sardines packed into a 20 sardine can, and they think they're so hot, and they think they're so sexy, and they're just plain stupid, slutty tramps. And I think putting somebody, I'm trying to think of who a really good example would be. I don't know. I thought Shirley Feeney was sexy, personally. And I think that Miley Cyrus is embarrassing. I mean, just flatline embarrassing, and it's not even that. I mean, I just feel sorry for her when I see her doing this with the whole thing with the tongue for a while. I just see her doing this, and I just think this poor girl. I mean, this is what fame, fortune, and money will do to you once the giant machine that lives over the hill behind me here sucks you into its, maw. Moloch. That's why I chose Metropolis as the sorry, I'm still a little gobsmacked here. That's why I chose Metropolis as the sort of the visual iconography for story mechanics, because they've got those workers that are going up in there, and it becomes a mouth that's just eating people. It's Moloch. It's this giant ball. It's the Babylonian death god. And yeah, Jacqueline Bisset in her Jacqueline Bisset. There you go. Now that was enough to keep you up at nights, and that kind of thing. Nobody. I'm not saying nobody would be offended by that, Eric. But if you've got a problem with that level of, if you've got a problem with plunging necklines on Pendragon, then I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you're not gonna convert anybody who really needs to be converted, because they're in an ocean of pornography out there, and it is completely rotting their brains. I had something to say about that, but I think I'll wait till Thursday when I'm a little more clear-headed on this, because I had an interesting thought about information pollution. So I'll save that for Stratosphere Lounge on Thursday. Right now, I'd just like to get through these and get out of here. Guy Balo. Hey, Guy. Greetings, Bill. What are your thoughts on the ever-increasing amount of space junk? Do you think that before any company can launch a satellite into space, they need to have a plan for its end-of-life disposal? We all know that government red tape is not the answer. It is a problem that everyone is aware of, but no one is willing to do anything about. Just as an example of what is going to happen to all of Elon's Starlink satellites when technology makes them obsolete, then we have the Chinese just blowing up satellites, turning one piece into thousands of pieces. Have you heard any way of dealing with the space junk that's economically feasible? Guy, there is a term. Is it the Edinger? Is it Edinger event? The term I've heard that I like applied to this theoretical and unlike nuclear weapons, I think extremely likely and catastrophic because it's out of our control. Is called the cascade. So basically, we were talking about Oppenheimer earlier, but basically the idea of the cascade is you have a satellite that hits by another satellite. Now you've got thousands of pieces of debris. Those thousands of pieces go out and hit other pieces, and then they turn into millions of pieces of debris. And then the next thing you know, Earth has a ring around it composed of pieces of satellites, and you can't get to space anymore. You just can't. Space is closed off to you. Now, you mentioned specifically the Starlink. My understanding, I don't have this backed up, my understanding is that Starlink is low enough and small enough so that they are expected to decay. They're not expected to be up there a long time. They're such inexpensive satellites. They're already doing version 3 or 4 or whatever, the Starlink satellites. So those things are tiny and they're low. And I think any collision that occurs with that, I don't think they're in the same orbits as any of the bigger satellites. They're the Kessler syndrome. Thanks for that, Jake Coulter there. But it is an absolute, genuine, real problem, and it could happen tomorrow. I mean, it could be happening right now for all we know. So Elon's aware of this. He's putting up thousands of these things. I'm quite sure that they are in lower orbits than major satellites, and that they are built to decay relatively shortly. But the higher orbits, higher parts of low Earth orbit, this is a genuine, real risk. There's already hundreds of thousands of pieces of junk up there. Somebody drops a bolt when they're working on the Hubble Space Telescope and so on. But I think the more interesting part of your question is, what do we do about it? My experience with human beings teaches me that we won't do anything about it until we have to. And you see, Darth Chuck the Merciless says they're designed to deorbit using a maneuvering fuel at the design lifespan of the satellite. Okay, so that makes sense. So he's intending to break those things up. So I'm not so much worried about Starlink, but there have been, I think there is a satellite mission that's been done where they had a vehicle that was designed to rendezvous with a dead satellite and deorbit it. The space station, it's hard to believe, but it's true. Every now and then they have to move the space station, that gigantic structure. They have to actually move it. They have to change its orbit because they realize that it's going to come close to a certain size piece of space junk. And so far, if something hits a space station and turns a space station into... Look, if something hits a satellite, turns a satellite into a shotgun blast, and that shotgun blast hits the space station, then we've got a ring, and we're sitting here on the planet for a while. But let's just say that happened tomorrow. Let's just say that this cascade event happens and we can't get to space anymore. Well, then the first thing that we're going to do is because we need space. Space is not a luxury anymore and hasn't been for decades. We have to have access to space for communications, for everything else. So this is a case where if something like that happened, we would have pretty much every far-sighted venture capital firm funding companies that would find a way to go up and clean up that stuff. The smart way to do it, which again I fear, having studied humans for a while, is just not going to happen because we are inclined not to want to spend money or effort or blood or treasure on things that haven't happened yet. If it didn't happen yesterday and it didn't happen today, then it probably won't happen tomorrow, which is true. And so that's how you get Challenger and Columbia and the Titanic and all the rest of it. But if it were to happen, some of the options are. John Pershing just beat me to it. There's an opportunity that you could clean up some of this stuff up with ground-based lasers, with powerful lasers on the ground. You don't actually incinerate the debris, but you can presumably hit the. I mean, just stay with me. By the way, half of the stuff that's up there, half of it, is the upper stages of the boosters that launch the satellites. People don't realize this, but if you put a satellite into orbit, then the rocket that put that thing into orbit stays in orbit. I've got a great app here called Go Sat Watch, and I love it because it tells me when I'm in a dark sky, I can just bring this thing up and it knows where I am, and it says in 4 minutes there's going to be a magnitude 2 satellite crossing over here. But I'll just show you real quick. It's on. Hang on. Come on. Okay, here's a good example. So I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but this is real time. You can see that, whoops, that stuff's below the horizon. It's very, very hard to tell, but the things with the wings on the side, the light colored things are satellites, and the gray cylinders are the boosters. So there's about as many boosters up there as there are satellites. Let me just zoom in here. Come on. See, it's reason it keeps jumping around is because this tells me where the satellites are right now. I can touch up this one, for example, and realize that right up there at the moment, right at this moment, right there is Yaogan 29, Chinese satellite, and it is currently 5th magnitude, which means barely visible to the naked eye on a dark night. 6th magnitude is the human eye's limit on a dark night. Blackest night you'll find you can see 6 down to the 6th magnitude. But anyway, I suspect that if this happens, all of the money that's going into satellites, telecommunications, and all of that, including vast amounts of defense budget money from the United States, China, and everybody else, is going to be dedicated to finding ways to get that stuff cleaned up. Vector Death says, why don't I ever see satellites in front of the full moon? Well, it's funny you mention that because if you search for ISS moon, you'll find or ISS sun, you'll find lots of pictures of the International Space Station crossing in front of the moon and the sun. But you got to understand, the International Space Station is enormous compared even to a large satellite. I mean, any one of the modules on the ISS is about as big as the largest satellite up there. And when you see the ISS against the sun, it's just, you can make out that it's the ISS. It's a fun thing to, let me just show you a picture. The bottom line is that these objects are 100 and some miles away from us, and if you've got something the size of I don't know, let's just say a Volkswagen or a Mini Cooper or something, and you move that Mini Cooper 114 miles away, which is about how high up they are, even if they're directly overhead, you can't see that Mini Cooper anymore. It's just a speck. So that's why you can't see them crossing in front of the moon, but they do, and they cross in front of the sun as well. Hang on a second. Let's try the moon. It'll be a little cooler. Hang on. There's a video. I haven't seen this yet. Come on. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm going to download this. Oh, this is really cool. This is really, really cool. And it's only 50 seconds long. Yeah, this is awesome. Give me 1 second. I'll grab this, download it, and drop it into the comment sections here. This is really, 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 really cool. It's one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time. So to answer your question, why you cannot see the ISS, just takes me a second to get to our downloader here and grab it and chuck it up there. Yeah, well, what a cool hang on. Here we go. $1080. Good. I should be able to just drop this right in without having to resize it. It takes, by the way, it's not only is it very, very small, it's also very, very, very fast. It takes half a second for the ISS to cross in front of the moon. Half a second. As you are about to see for yourself. This is a cool little video. I'm really, really glad I found this. Thanks for the question. All right, here we go. I'm going to drop it into YouTube first. Make sure I got the right one. Yep. Here you go, YouTube. Enjoy. And I'll drop it into Twitch. It's not full frame, but it's, you'll see. Moonhead. Pretty cool, huh? Hopefully that answered your question. Turn that baby, just delete that sucker. Okay. Yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. So that's why you can't see satellites. And again, you realize how small that was against the moon. Remember, that is the biggest thing out there by far. I mean, 2 orders of magnitude. So that's why you can't see them in front of the moon. Yeah, it was neat. Okay, I think we got 1 left or 2 left. Let's see what else we got here. Come on, where did I put that? Oh, here we go. We got 2 left. Road Rider. Okay, get ready, Bill. Rapid fire. Keep your answers short and pithy. I don't want to break the Eric Blake rules, so 1 or 2 word answers are just fine. Question 1. Did you get over your gas problems Friday? Was it painful? Everyone could hear it. I hope we're talking about the same thing. Yes. Question 2. You're such a gearhead now. Do you communicate with Dave Berg, Iowa Hawk, when you get stuck on a project SS? Which would be Super Sport. Oh, and you're saying it wrong. Not Camaro. It's Camaro. It's like Kamala, not a Camaro. I've never heard anybody refer to it as a Camaro. If it turns out it is a Camaro and not a Camaro, then I'm selling the Camaro. Question 3. It worked for Oprah and Kamala, and it worked for you in 2020. Can we do a member Zoom call again? Yes, those were fun. I want to do that, definitely. Instead of a cruise or an expensive retreat, hat tip, I posted this in the blog this week that the Brady Bunch post request to participate would go through the Bill W. forum. Yes, that's a great idea. And I don't generally like Zoom, but Zoom is perfect for this kind of thing. So I will definitely do that. And I will get to those super chats in just a second here. Last question. Why do you think Elon caved to Brazil? It's not like he has ex-shareholders to please. I don't know what caving to Brazil had to do with. I don't know what it is. I know nothing about the story. And he's got a picture of a kitten in the mouth of Nancy Pelosi, which is exceedingly disturbing, except for the fact that the kitten looks very happy, which is paradoxical to me. Okay, so there's that. Eric Blake, last one. What happened? No. Moment, please. So, Bill, as you may or may not be aware, probably not, last Saturday was Batman Day. I did not know that. That is, it was the anniversary of the first appearance of the Dark Knight in any medium. Now, the obvious question to ask in light of this would be, what's your favorite take on the Caped Crusader? But I'm reasonably sure I can guess what it is, so I'll ask. Aside from memories of enjoying 60s Adam West Batman as a kid, what is it about that show that you find valuable today? As I've said before, I find the John Wick franchise a solid modern take on camp, but what is it about camp, for example, that's so valuable nowadays? Well, first of all, my favorite take on Batman is the Tim Burton Batman with Michael Keaton. That movie actually changed my life. That movie is the movie that got me to go to the gym and work out every day for 3 years. I remember watching that movie and saying, I'm smart like Batman, but I can't do any of this kick-ass stuff. And I just said, well, that's going to change tomorrow. So I put on wouldn't know it to look at me now, but I put on a fair amount of muscle, at least compared to where I was before. So I really, really liked Michael Keaton's Batman. I liked the Tim Burton Batman very much. But as far as the 60s Batman show, I have two completely different opinions about that show. When I was a kid, I didn't think it was a joke. I took it completely seriously. I had a Batman outfit. I would stand down by the side of the road with my hands on my hips, and I had a plastic cowl. You had a little cloth mask that you would get with the Batman outfit. It wasn't a Halloween outfit. It was more substantial than that. But they also had like a plastic cowl. Like, sit there, you look like Dark Helmet and Spaceballs with a gigantic, huge plastic helmet on your head. And I would just stand there by the side of the road and keep the peace and enforce justice. And people would beep their horns when they went by because they saw Batman outside on the street. So I took it completely seriously, and I thought it was just terrific. Having watched it as an adult to appreciate the camp aspect of it, I like it much better. I mean, when I say I love the show, I mean I never missed it. I never ever missed it. It was my favorite thing of the week, sitting around waiting for Batman to show up. I remember being so amazed when Batman and the Green Hornet were both on each other's shows. I was just like, this is how is this possible? This is some kind of weird sorcery. But watching it now as an adult, I loved the show, and the more I see it, the better I love it. By the way, I didn't know this. I mean, it's not like a big reach or anything, but apparently Adam West and Burt Ward were swordsmen of the highest caliber. These guys were sleeping with 7, 8, 9 women a day, and I had heard that that he and Gorshin used to go out and were turned away from like orgies in the 60s because they insisted on staying in character, that kind of thing. Holy cow. Adam West is one of my favorite actors, and at Batman, Adam West, obviously, because the essence of camp is to do something ridiculous, but to do it absolutely bone dry, straight as an arrow. The ultimate Batman line, in my opinion, for me, by far, is there's a like a old-fashioned nightclub, like the like Ricky Ricardo's club at the Tropicana, where people would basically sit at tables and they'd have dinner and drinks, and there'd be somebody would sing. That was what nightclubs were back then. And there's this series of tables, and there's this center of the room where there's a spotlight, and as I recall, there's a woman there singing, and Batman and Robin enter this room, and the maitre d' comes up to him and says, "Oh, Batman and Robin, can I get you a stage side table?" And Batman says, "No, thank you. We don't want to call any undue attention to ourselves." And I thought, that is just so clever. It's so clever. It's so beautiful. All of the things that they did were self-referential, but they weren't self-referential in a snide or a cynical way. One of my favorite little tiny little moments in the show that you never would get as a kid. I hardly got it as an adult, but there was a time when they were down in the Bat Cave, and they have a picture of Wayne Manor comes up on the Bat computer, and below that it says Stately Wayne Manor. That's the caption, Stately Wayne Manor, because every time they referred to Wayne Manor, it was Bruce Wayne and his ward. Dick Grayson, in Stately Wayne Manor, and there was a picture of the house, and below that it was Stately Wayne Manor. That kind of thing was just fantastic. But I don't want to call undue attention to myself. And doing the Batusi, and just the whole thing, I just loved it. I thought the Batmobile, when I was a kid, I thought it was real. And I had it wasn't that little, actually. I had a black metal version of the Batmobile car, and you would push it, and they had a little plastic flame that worked with the wheels, that came out of the back like that. So where the flame came out of the back, you'd push this thing, and a little mechanism inside the car would make the flame go, and it launched satellites off of it and stuff. And I think the hood opened, or the doors opened, and the Batmobile was freaking awesome. In fact, one of the things that makes up for living in Los Angeles is living in Los Angeles. And not far from where I used to live is a showroom, and there it is. There's the Batmobile. The Batmobile. I just love the Batmobile. And I had all the Hot Wheels, and I love those Hot Wheels, by the way. Those futuristic Hot Wheels were my favorites. All of those futuristic cars. Let me see if I can find one of those. Hot Wheels were one of the greatest toys of all time. Gravity has never been more fun than it was with a Hot Wheels set. I'm going to see some pictures here that I haven't seen in pretty nearly 60 years. Because I'm trying to see if I remember any of these guys from the 60s. Because I had a lot of Hot Wheels. Yeah! Oh my God, it's only $95 now. Hang on, I'll grab this picture too. It was right there. Where'd it go? It was the futuristic car. Where'd it go? Hang on. Yeah. Check this out, boys and girls. Holy cow. Well, take a look at this. Anybody want to get a price on this? Here you go. Hang on. Let's try this one. Don't do this to me. I don't deserve it. Hey, look at that. Hang on, YouTube. I remember this baby. Anybody want to guess the price on this? Formerly, what was it? Probably about a $2 car, I want to say. You can own this Redline Hot Wheels 1968 Silhouette. I think it's called Antifreeze. Very nice, and it's only $223. This guy's got. See if there's anything else I recognize. Yeah, I remember that one. I loved them. I loved them. Yeah, they're awesome. They were really fun. And they're hundreds of dollars now. That's good. I'm glad somebody's preserved them. That's the nice thing about this. One of the great things about the internet is anything you ever remembered, you can find again. Even stuff that existed before the computer age has been digitized and collected by people, and now you can go back and watch old Batman episodes, and you can watch just about almost anything, really. So anyway, that's the last of the questions. So I'm going to call it a night here, and give some serious thought to some of the things that we talked about earlier in the show. Some reflections I think are due, and I have to give that that whole thing a real serious thinking about, because that got my attention. This show is made possible by the members of BillWhittle.com, those of them who are still left anyway, and we're very grateful for your support over the years, for everybody who's been here. If I missed some super chats, I'm sorry. I'll get you next time. Thank you for sending them. And that'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Studio. So we will see you on Thursday night on the Stratosphere Lounge. Good night to you, YouTube.